Slouchy Shopper Sew-Along. This sew-along covers making a slouchy shopper, and in the video you'll see me making this lovely striped version. It's the medium size of the bag with the detachable shoulder strap. It unusually has a zipper. So when I first created the pattern, I wanted to make it super simple, a really accessible beginner's bag making pattern with no tricky details, very straightforward, some nice, easy, interesting details to keep us all happy, but fundamentally nothing that you would be nervous about trying to tackle by yourself. But when I decided to do the Sewalong video, I thought it was a good opportunity to add a zipper to the pattern. So you can download the Slouchy Zipper add-on for free from the website. There's a tutorial on how to add it integrate it into the pattern as you're making your slouchy shopper, and we'll cover how to do it here in the Sew-Along as well. So as you can see, it's basically the zipper is attached to two side strips, and then it is fixed into the bag between the main lining bag and the facing. So it's very straightforward, and if you're going to make a slouchy shopper without a zipper, it's covered fully in this video as well. I will talk you through that at the stage when you would naturally in the pattern continue without a zipper. I'll bring all of that to your attention, and it'll be very straightforward to make the slouchy shopper without a zipper following this video. So the pattern also has a lovely internal pocket, which unusually I've made out of the outer fabric just because I liked the stripes so much, and how to make a lanyard strap as well. So I've made mine out of a cotton twill, but as part of the sew along I have also made one out of the fabric from the pattern, out of a fabric from the pattern piece. So that's covered quite clearly. I have also covered as part of this video how to make the adjustable strap option that's in the pattern. So if that's what you're doing, you'll be covered in this video also. So this is stage one. I've divided the sew-along video into 3 stages. They're all there on YouTube now. And the first stage is going to cover the tools and the hardware, the notions that you're going to need to make the pattern. It also covers the fabric. I talked to you about the fabric I'm using, and I talked to you about the pattern pieces and preparing them, the notches, and the direction of the grain that I've used for this. We will also, as part of this stage, prepare the outer bag, make the fabric handles, and we will get as far as making the lining pocket and the lanyard strap. We'll also cover, oh no, that's it. So that's stage one. Then in stage 2, we will prepare the lining bag, and that will include all of the zipper add-on parts of the tutorial. So we'll make the lining bag, add the zips, and we will also make the adjustable strap and the strap connectors and add them to the outer bag. So that'll be stage 2. And then stage 3 is all the fun, where you get to put the outer bag and the lining bag together to make your slouchy shopper. It will also cover making the leather strap at that stage, because I always like to do the detachable strap at the end so I can judge the length of the strap with a finished or semi-finished bag. And we will finish the end of the zipper. So in this bag I've used a metal zipper to stop, but as part of the tutorial I've also shown making a fabric tab for the end of your zipper too. So that's it. Okay, let's get started with stage 1. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you find it really useful. Do tag me on Instagram or on Facebook. Join our Facebook Incomplete Stitches Sew and Share group to share your slouchy shopper makes, especially if you're doing it during the sew along. I really do love seeing my patterns come to life, and really appreciate it when people tag me and share the work. I'm pretty much out of my comfort zone making videos, but I hope to do more. And I know the Apex Carry video has been really helpful to lots of people, and I hope this one is too. Okay, let's get started with the slouchy shopper sew along. So at this stage we're just going to gather all the materials we need. We're going to get all the tools that we need if we need anything extra to the usual, and I'll talk through all the ironmongery notions that we're going to use to make the bag. I'm going to make a medium size slouchy shopper, I'm going to add a leather detachable strap onto it, but I will also cover in the sew along adding an adjustable strap as well that's attached to the bag. I'm not going to finish it with that strap, but I'll cover how to do that. I'll make the strap and we'll just pin it into place so that you know where it will go if that's the option you're going to make. As you know, we're going to add a zipper to the pattern, and there's an extra pattern piece that's available as a PDF to download, so you should have that before you get started. It's a little zipper strip to add to either side of the zipper to make it sit into the bag neatly and the way I like to do the zipper for this type of bag. So we're going to do that. You need about 45 centimeters or 18 inches of a zip for the medium size, and you'll need about 55 centimeters or 22 inches for the larger size. You'll also need a zipper pull, and I'm going to use, because I love having these, they're super neat. It's a zipper end thing that you add onto the end of the zip to finish it. But I'll cover how to add a little fabric strip at the end as well, because that's obviously you may not have one of these to hand, but they're really neat little zipper ends. Okay, so let's talk through the tools that we're going to need. I'm going to be cutting out my pattern piece with a rotary cutter. So I have my rotary cutter there. It has an old blade in it, and I bought a new blade, but I can't find it. So I'm going to be using the old blade, which will irritate me. Obviously I use my pattern weights as well to hold down the pattern. So that's the Just Me or Just Wait pattern weight tutorial pattern weights that I have available on the website. So I love just using a rotary blade to cut out fabric. You can just do really clean straight cuts really neatly, but obviously you can use scissors alternatively, but definitely if you haven't used a rotary cutter, a cutting mat, it's brilliant. I always have a small scissors available for snipping threads and tidying things up. I'll be using my iron to press all my seams. It makes a huge difference to the neatness of all of your work is if you press them. An option if you don't have an iron handy, or especially when you're making small bags, so not so much for this pattern, but a seam roller is a great little alternative to press open seams, maybe in a fabric that you can't press very well, or in a tiny little pattern that you can't get into at the seams very easily. Always have a stitch ripper at hand, because unfortunately it does end up being used. I have a little pokey tool that my husband made me. It's like a Hera tool, although I do want him to make that sharper at the end there, but a great thing for just poking corners out. I really love this tool. It's a square ruler made by Generates, who created it, invented the thing. I got mine from Fabric Romance, but it's just really handy for setting out your straps and making sure they're square with the edge of the bag. It's a really nifty tool. I use it all the time, and I found this other little ruler in a shop in Italy once, so that's really handy as well. I have my tape measure. I have just put a 8012 universal needle into the machine, so a new needle. I use an 8012 needle for almost all of my sewing, my bag sewing. Occasionally I'll need a heavier weight needle, but really I think you need to just get used to what needle works with your machine and the weight of fabric you're using, and that is a matter of experience. But I definitely, like, denim needles can be very handy, but I've never had any difficulty with almost every fabric using an 8012 needle on it. So that's that. I'm going to be using rivets to attach my leather strap to my my swivel hooks. So I'll have two, I think, on each. I haven't decided yet, but I think I will go with two on each. I might go with one on each end. So I have my rivets, and they need to be long enough to go through the two layers of leather, which that is. I have a rivet fixer, which I don't have the correct ends. I only have one correct end and one incorrect die, but it'll work. And I have a hole puncher to punch the holes in the leather. So because I'm using the leather strap, I'm going to have a detachable strap. I'm going to have 2 D-rings and that match the size of the leather strap, and 2 pivot hooks for each end of the strap as well. For an adjustable strap, I have a 25mm, so a 1-inch webbing with a rectangular, this is kind of a curved end rather than rectangular ring for one end, which you'll be making a little one piece like that, and then on the other piece of your strap you're going to be putting an adjustable slider onto that. So we'll talk through that when we're doing it. In terms of other notions, I'm going to have a lanyard with a pivot hook on that as well, and instead of using the pattern piece, I'm going to use a piece of cotton twill tape. I just have a load of this from Ray Stitch I got in London years ago, and I find it really useful. It's lovely and soft but strong, and it doesn't fray easily. Well, it doesn't fray at all once it's sewn in, and it is just really, I find it really handy for any kind of an adjustable slider or any kind of strap that you're adding into your bag. The pattern calls up using fabric, and the way the strap for the lanyard is made is the same way as the hand straps are made. So we'll cover that in the hand strap, and I'll remind you of that if you want to use fabric for it. I think I said I have a little bit of leather for my zipper pulls as well. In terms of thread, I really like to match my thread as closely to the fabric as possible. Generally, it's so much more forgiving than having contrasting top stitching and contrasting thread. And so I'm going with a black thread generally for the outer fabric, and when I'm doing any top stitching on the lining, which in fact I don't think I am going to be doing any top stitching on the lining, but I also have thread that matches the lining as well, as close as I could. But fundamentally it's the fabric, the top stitching of your outer fabric will be most visible. So definitely if you only have one set of thread, go with the matching the outer fabric as best as you can. What else do I have here? I think I've spoken through everything. Okay, we're going to be adding a zipper, so you may need a zipper foot for sewing in your zipper. I'm going to be able to use the same foot, the standard foot on my machine, because it's quite narrow and I find it quite a nice size for adding my zippers in. So I won't be changing zipper foot, but you might have a wider foot on your machine and might need a narrower zipper foot or an adjustable foot to do your zipper. I have my little bag of clips, which I don't use very often, to be honest. Some patterns I use them all the time, but usually I use pins. I trust them much more. I have my little pin cushion. I love using glass headed pins. I have really sharp, good ones that are bent at this stage. I could do with some new ones from Merchant and Mills. So I just, good sharp pins are very, very useful. Okay, I think we're ready to go now. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut out my fabric. So maybe I'll talk you through how I'm going to use that fabric, and yeah, let's do that. Okay, let's talk about the fabric I'm going to use. I love striped denim. I think it's great. Actually, I have here, I recently bought a load of leather tools for making and working with leather, so I may have my own little striped railroad denim sunrise pouch. So I love how you can work with stripe direction, and denim is a lovely bag making weight fabric. So yeah, I really enjoy working with this type of fabric. This is a fabric, a striped denim that is quite wide. It's also quite a loose weave fabric, so I'm hoping that it's not going to be too loose weave. I don't think it is. I think it's going to be lovely slouchy, a lovely weight for a slouchy shopper. It's two-sided, so I'll be using this side as my external fabric. Well, it's not two-sided, it's got a front and a back, so obviously this will be the front. I'm going to work with the pattern, the stripes running, I think, horizontally on my bag, and then running vertically on the facing around the top on the inside, and on the base I'm going to run it, the stripes perpendicular to the front and the back. So that'll make more sense when I've cut it out. Some fabrics have a stronger direction, if you're going across the grain versus with the grain, most of the time you're fine. Most of the time, if they're a stable fabric, there's very little in the difference between with the grain and across the grain, and as long as you're not going on the bias, there shouldn't be a problem, and there certainly won't be here. And then for the lining, I'm using medium or light to medium weight. I think it's cotton linen canvas, a Ruby Star Society cotton linen canvas, with a bit of a bronze metallic in it. I'm going to use this just for the lining, the main lining pieces. I'm going to use the outer fabric for the lining pocket. I think a lot of our testers did it. I've done it in lining fabric and I've done it in the outer fabric, and it's very much up to you. I actually have a lot more of this fabric available, and the lining pocket is actually quite a big piece of fabric, relatively big piece of fabric. So I think I'll be able to play with my stripes a little bit more still. I just think it'll look great. So that's the plan. So I'm going to go and get my big cutting mat and cut it out, and I'll come back and talk you through all the pattern pieces then. Okay, so I have all my pattern pieces cut out, and let me talk you through them. This is the main lining, front and back, and this is the main outer, front and back. So in many cases where it stays relatively straightforward, I will do my best to use the same piece of pattern piece for two pattern pieces. So the main outer and the main lining are more or less the same size. The main outer is a little bit taller because the main lining has a facing at the top, and the main lining has the base integrated into it, whereas for the outer it's a separate piece. So you can see here that, so we've got the main outer is A, so that's cut out from A to A, and the main lining is B, so that cuts out from B to B. So that's what I've done there. There now. So that's my main lining pattern piece. I have clipped all my notches, which I'm usually not so disciplined about, but I'm actually going to go around and mark them with a pen. Now usually I use a heat erasable pen, but in reality you're never going to see the seam allowances, and the fabric's not sheer, so you're never going to see any marks. As long as you're happy it's not going to bleed, it might be useful to use a permanent pen that's not going to disappear when you iron it. So another point in relation to cutting out notches is, as you can see there, I've only cut out barely 5mm, so barely 3/16 of an inch. You just cut into the fabric enough that you can see it. You don't want to cut in too far because it'll undermine the strength of the fabric, and I have seen people cutting in even so far that it's right through the seam allowance, which obviously then you'll have a nick in your fabric that you can see. So I do advise strongly to mark your seam allowances at the start. It makes life, or mark your notches at the start. It makes life a lot easier. So I'm just going to, as we go along, I'm going to just mark them in pen as well. So I've got one in the top center, one there, and then I have the hole in the lining where we're going to sew it up marked at the bottom either side here as well. I have to be really careful I don't mark my my actual fabric. Next up I have my top facing, so I'm going to run my stripes sitting vertically on the top facing, and again I have my center notches marked or cut into, and so I'm just going to mark them again. So I have that marked. I forgot to mark, there is a lanyard notch on your pattern pieces, and so make sure you add that in, or don't worry about it, you'll just sit it next to the pocket when you've done the pocket anyway, or beside the pocket, so it's not the end of the world. The two pattern pieces I'm not using, I am using it. The shoulder strap, because I'm using a leather strap, and the lanyard, because I'm using my twill tape for the lanyard. But you can see on both of these pattern pieces I have marked the folding of it for when you're actually making the strap, and we'll go through that when we're doing the hands. So they're all made in the same fashion, so you're making a strap like that, and the hand strap is done in the same way. Okay, so these are my hand straps, I think, yep. So I've decided that I wanted to kind of highlight the stripe as much as possible, and so with the stripe running in that orientation, it kind of shows it off better than if it were running that way. So you can hear lots of seagulls here. I don't know if you could, that's gonna come up on the so anyway, those are the hand straps. I've no notches or anything on that. And because I'm doing a detachable strap, I'm gonna have two strap connector pieces. So I've them cut out in the main outer fabric. And I have my base, which I should have talked about earlier. So that is cut out. So my stripes are on my main outer are running horizontal, and on my base are running perpendicular. So that should look well. And I can see my notches there, which somehow aren't on the same position, but anyway, they're fine. Okay. And now my lining pocket is made out of the stripy outer fabric, because I just think the contrast would be lovely with the lining. And I don't know if it's going to press as neatly. I'm a little nervous about this fabric now, because I'm not sure it's going to press as crisply as another fabric might, but we'll see. It's always worth the risk. So yeah, I have my notches, side notches cut out along here as well. If you forget to do your notches, especially the centre one, the easiest way to find it is to fold your fabric in half and pinch it. And I actually have got them marked there. So there and there. Okay, so that's my fabric all ready to go. As you know, there is no interfacing, which is fantastic. Interfacing is brilliant for making your bag structured and strong and resilient, but it is a pain to do. I find it a painful exercise, a waste of time. I want to just have fun sewing, not ironing interfacing and cutting out interfacing. So this is a nice pattern in that regard. So let me just talk to you again about, the extra pattern piece, which is the main, the zipper sides for the main zip that we're adding in this sew along. So I've cut out two pieces in outer fabric and two pieces in lining fabric. So these will run either side of the zipper, which will run in here, and then they'll be attached where the facing meets the main lining. So we'll go through all that when we're, I've no notches cut out. They are 4.5 centimeters by 33 centimeters long. I can't give you an exact inch equivalent to that, but I'll give you an estimate. Obviously the pattern piece is drawn, and you can download that from my website, no problem. Yeah, I think it's time to, is it time to get sewing? Okay, so I've moved my camera in a little bit closer. I've plugged in my iron. I have my main outer main panels. I have my base, and I have my two hand straps. So I'll put them aside for the moment. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is attaching my base to my main outer. So in this case, I need to make sure that I have my main outer piece is the right way up. So I've got hand strap notches on the top. So that's the top of my fabric. I've hand strap notches on my top, on both sides, on both pieces. So that's, I'll put one main outer aside, and I'm going to attach my main base center notch to center notch, right sides together, and then I'm going to pin in place. So as I said, I 99% of the time use pins over, so you can see there that's roughly equal distance there. The main point being the center is centered. So I'll pin in place. One tip to use when you're sewing fabric and you don't want it to shift, the top fabric is more likely to shift down as you sew than the bottom fabric. So if you're using fabric of two different weights, the heavier, thicker, more stable fabric, I always try my best to put it on the top when I'm sewing so that it is less likely to get kind of pushed along by your foot of the sewing machine. These are both the same, so it doesn't really matter. I'm hoping they're relatively stable. I'm going to sew this with a 1 centimeter or a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I have my black thread in the bobbin and in the main thread. The bobbin thread doesn't have a huge amount in it, but hopefully it will it'll keep us going. What I am actually going to do, I've just realised, is what's important to me in this is that I want my stripe to be even. Obviously this one running perpendicular is fine, but I'm actually going to flip it over, which is not the norm, so that I'm going to make sure I'm sewing along a stripe that's not so I'm at the edge of my base there. I have my 1 centimeter seam allowance, or 3/8 inch, and so I'm going to follow this. I'm basically going to be running down the center of this stripe here, which is 1 centimeter away. So I've a stitch length of about 2.5. That's what I like to sew all my main seams with. Back stitch at the start. Take out that pin. So long. So I'm not looking at my needle. I'm always looking at where, at some point on my, either a dot on my presser foot or the edge of a presser foot, and I'm keeping that in line with something. So I can feel this fabric is actually a little bit unstable and is slipping, so I'm going to be very careful to try and hold it. You can see it's kind of looking to bubble a little bit. So I'm going to use my stitch ripper. It can be very handy to help keep your fabric in place. I'm just making sure that my seam allowance isn't creeping out. So black stitch at the end. Okay. So that's it. That's quite good actually. So I'm going to now press my seam allowance towards the base. I was nearly saying it the other way. So I'm pressing my seam allowance towards the base. So the base is mastering the outer panel. So I'm going to go over to the iron now and give that a press. So that's lovely and neat. And now I'm going to top stitch along this seam. So I'm going to change my stitch length to about 3.5. Because a slightly bigger stitch length just looks neater. And again, I'm going to be making sure that my fabric stays pulled out and a nice straight seam. And I'm going to sew along here just whatever distance you're comfortable away from the seam. In the pattern I call up about 3 millimeters, I think. I don't even know if I do call it up, I probably just say edge stitch or top stitch along. So what I will be doing is, there's a little shine on my my zipper foot, and I'm going to make sure the fabric stays in line. It's actually it's a dot between two shiny bits, and I'm going to keep my seam in between those two, along that line. Again, back stitch at the end, so that'll be within the seam allowance, you won't see the back stitching. And I'm just going to sew along. Okay, so that's nice and straight and neat along there. So now I'm going to do the same process and attach the other side of my main bag. So that is my base, because my hand straps are there at the top. Again, I'm doing it upside down because I want to make sure I'm going to be running along a stripe here as well. But I think normally you would have the base panel on the top as you're sewing. I'm just going to make sure my seam allowances are, or my center notches are joined up first. They are. I'm at the edge of my fabric there. I'm going to go with a 1 centimeter 3/8 inch seam allowance. My fabric is there. Yeah, and I'm pretty much the same. I did cut it out relatively accurately, so my I'm running down the center of that stripe. So my stitch length has gone back to 2.5. Back stitch at the end start. So that's the end of my base is under there. You have to trust me on that. Okay, so again, we're going to make sure the main outer panel is flat and the seam allowance is pressed towards the base. Okay, so that looks great. A nice, neat seam. And I'm going to top stitch along it. And seam allowance or stitch length to about 3.5. Always try and adjust your fabric as you go along. If you need to stop just to make sure everything's running through nice and smoothly. If you need to roll up your fabric a little so that it runs under the sewing machine arm. So that's the main outer, and so now I'm stepping on to step 2. So I'm still going to be using this, but I'm going to make my hand straps. So I have my 2 hand strap pattern pieces cut out. I am going to press them in to the center. Then I'm going to open that up. So press them into the center. Then I'm going to open up that fold and I'm going to press the 2 sides in. This is all with the wrong sides together, as you can see the right side. I'm going to try and keep my stripes lining up, and then that'll be folded in. And I tend to just top stitch along one side. I like that they're not top stitched on both sides, but that's just total personal preference. So I'm going to go over to the iron and do that pressing, and I'll talk you through it again. Okay, so I have my 2 hand straps pressed. As I said, the first thing I did was I pressed them in to create the center fold, and then I pressed both sides in. It is quite fray fabric, isn't it? Press both sides in and press back over the center fold. So I've done my best to match my my stripes. I am going to do my best not to worry too much about it. Just pin these in place, and then I'm going to sew down the edge to close. So I'm top stitching, so my stitch length is 3.5. Again, I'm looking at this little glint of light on my presser foot, and I'm keeping the fabric in line with that. So that's okay. At every stage as you go along, make sure there's no threads sticking out of your seam allowances, or out of your seams, because they'll just be annoying. So that's one side done. And I'm only going to top stitch down one side. I quite like that they're not symmetrical. So those are my 2 hand straps prepared. And now I'm going to attach them to the main outer. So I'll take one hand strap, and I have a notch here and a notch here, and the edges of my hand straps are going to sit beside those notches. So, oh, wrong way around, like that. And this is where my little square ruler is really handy. And in the pattern I have it called up that the edge of your strap is to be 2 centimeters from the edge of your fabric. So that is about I think 1.5 inches from the edge of your fabric. and I'm going to, I tend to like to have this edge at the inside, so it's 2.5 from there to there, and my notch is there, so, and this is nice and perpendicular. So I will sew one in place first, keeping it as perpendicular as I can. Just pin it in place there, and I'm just basting it in. The main seam, when I close the top seam, it's going to hold it in place again. So I'm going to sew it somewhere around 0.5 centimetre or 3/16 inch seam allowance. Okay, and then I can take out that pin and now bring this one around. And again, I have my ruler and sitting in line with my notch and 2 centimetres from the edge, and making sure my strap isn't twisted. It has happened before. So I'm not even going to pin it, I'm actually just going to bring it over and sew. Okay, so one thing to note, when you're closing the top seam, it's really important to try and keep that, not really important, it is marginally important to try and keep your straps running perpendicular, so that they sew in perpendicular when you're finished. You'll be pulled up like that. Okay, so now do the other end. Okay, so they're both done. And the next thing will be to move on to step 3, which is to close the side seams. So don't have to line them up or anything, but we're going to be taking the top corner and the bottom corner, and I'm going to pin that in place and sew along with a 1 centimetre or a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to be making sure doing my best to match my stripes, and we'll see how that goes. So let me pin that. I'm going to pin it quite frequently here because it'll really annoy me if they're not. I can't help it. But I'll live with it whatever way it turns out. Okay, so I have that all pinned. Hope for the best. So maybe put the bottom up. Make sure my stitch length is 2.5. And I'm sewing with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. I did sew over a couple of needles, which I know you're not meant to do. A couple of pins rather. So the first thing I always do is just check, well, apart from checking my stripes, I'm checking for any stray threads. So I'll try and get them out straight away. So now I'm going to go over and press that open. Okay. So that looks pretty good to me. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. And now I'm going to do the same on the other side. There's quite a few threads coming out of this fabric, so I'm actually going to trim them back a little bit now before I start. Okay, so the same thing, I'm going to check for loose threads before I press it to get rid of any. Yeah, again, it's not perfect, but it is close enough, I think. Now, so that's one side, and the other. Gosh, one side is fraying way more, isn't it? So the next step is to close or to box out the bottom corners. So you have a center notch on the base, and you have a center seam, side seam, and so they want to line up together. So you can see my center notch just about, I can see it there. You possibly can't, but there's a center notch there, and I often just pin both sides of that center seam, holding my my seam allowance down, and then you just pull the sides out and you line up this as best you can. Now I've got my stripes to contend with, so I think, so there's a couple of important things here. One is make sure you have done the step, and you're in trouble now if you haven't already, but it is important to do the top stitching of the base because it affects how this seam sits. And I've done a couple of workshops with the same base construction, and people had forgotten to do that step, hadn't done the top stitching, and then when they went to do this, it just didn't sit right. Now you're able to do it, and you're able to push it into place, but it's very handy. So I've got a stripe here that I want to master, and I also want to master it on the base. I'm not really sure which is the most important. One is sitting tiny bit diagonally off, I'd say there. So I think I'm going to go with the base. The other thing you want to make sure that you do is that when at the very corners that you've actually gone past the edge of the stitching and the top stitching of the base. So if that means that you need to come in more than 1 centimeter seam allowance, that's totally fine. Come in as much as you need to get past all that stitching and make sure you can get it secure. So I'm going to come in, I think, to this line here, which is about close enough to 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and I just need to remember to apply that roughly to the same to the other side, and when I'm doing my lining, to make sure I have roughly the same amount of seam allowance allowed. So yeah, so I'm going to sew along there, along that line, which in this case is around a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and then I'll turn it right side out and see what that looks like. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So a few threads to pull out. Let me take that from the inside. Okay, so it might be difficult to see in the with the stripes, but see the way that the corner is a little bit past the base? That's totally fine. And on this side, it's more or less the same. They're both a little bit past the base. And that looks really well. And the stripe is nice and neat. You don't really need to press this seam because it's kind of going to want to press itself out, and it's kind of folded in. Yep, and that looks great. So I'm going to do the other side. So again, I am lining up my side seam with my center seam and pin in place, making sure I'm keeping my 2 seam allowances of the sides down, and then pull out my side so that it sits flat. And so it was about 1.5 on the other side. I don't think my base stripe is centered, let's say, so I may not be following the same stripe, but I'll go with roughly 1.5 if I'm happy with that, which you can see. They're not running totally parallel with each other, the base and the side seams. So I'll try to pull that into place a bit better. Okay, that's better, I think. So 1.5 is sitting kind of halfway along that stripe there for me, so that's what I'm going to use. Now we'll check that seam. And yeah, that looks good to me. Oh, my stripes really did slip off there at the bottom, didn't they? Oh well. not to worry. I think they look great anyway. So that's the outer bag more or less ready. So we're going to move on to the lining now. Okay, so the next step is to make the lining pocket, which is my favourite step. It's really neat, it is straightforward, and it is, I just think, really nifty. So what we start off with is that we have all of our notches marked, centre notches, and then there's 2 notches here and here. So what you're going to be doing is pulling the centre notch up to meet the top notch and folding it over and sewing up the side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just gently press, because it's going, just gently press the centre line. So I would do that. Okay, so I've pressed these wrong sides together, okay? But what I'm going to be doing is the centre, of the fabric is going to come up to meet that top notch there, and then there should be a fold in underneath there at the other notches. But fundamentally, just make sure that your centre notches are up there, or that your centre of the fabric is up there. And I'm going to pin it to make sure my stripes stay in place. But I think they will. They're actually, I don't think I need to pin that. So that's one, those are in place, and then this folds up to meet it, and they should be in line. So you'll see there you have, that's the front of the pocket, that's your pocket in there, and this is the back of the pocket. So I'm going to pin all of that together, and then I'm going to sew down here and sew down here with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. One thing, it's actually no harm if this top, if this is going to be the back, this effectively has to fold around a little bit further than the front. It's no harm if that fold is the tiniest bit further over this way. I'm only talking a teeny tiny bit, and it's not the end of the world if it's not either. But I'm sewing with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Again, I'm going to be using my stripes here as a guidance, kind of more importantly than the perfect seam allowance. But yeah, let's do that. Making sure I backstitch here, because this corner is going to be pushed out, so you want it nice and secure. And I do the same on the other side. So now I think I can see that there's not too much stuff in my seam, there's no thread sticking out there, too obvious. So the temptation would be to clip that corner to turn it, but we're not going to do that. We're going to fold that corner in and hold it, okay? And then we're going to put our hand in, and we're staying with just this one layer of fabric here, and our hand is going in, and the triple layer is behind my hand. So, and I'm going to hold this corner as I turn. Okay, and I'm going to do one side, and then I'm going to go back in and do the other, even though this might come loose a bit or might not stay in the same shape, but I just want to make sure I hold this corner and turn it. And so my thumb is still there on the corner, and my finger, and then I'm going to push it out there like that. So it's not perfect just yet, but it's nice and neatly pushed. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to fold the seam allowance in, and I'm going to grab it between my forefinger and thumb, and then I'm going to turn and push that corner out. So I hope that was visible for you. Okay, so you can see there that that corner is pretty straight already, pretty pointy already. So what I'm going to do is, now if this was a thinner fabric, it would sit a lot neater. But what I'm going to do is just get my pokey stick. I'm just going to get that in there and poke it out a little bit more. Just gently pressing the corner into place. And then I'm going to go over to the iron and press it all, and you'll see it'll be lovely and neat. I'll just make sure I get these threads out first. Okay, so there you have it. So pretty perfect corners, strong secure corners because they haven't been clipped, and the seam allowance is kind of holding the square shape of the corner. So that's working out great. So the next thing I need to do is grab one of my pieces of lining, and I'm actually going to give these a press because I think there's a few. Yeah, I'm going to just press these first because there's a few wrinkles in the fabric. Okay, so I have my two linings just pressed a little bit flatter. There we are. I have a top center notch in the lining and a top center notch in my lining pocket, so I'm going to line them up nice and neatly. Pin it in place with about a ½ centimetre or 3/16 of an inch seam allowance. Just lengthen my stitch length a little bit too. So it's just tacking it or basting it in place. There, that's lovely. So the next thing we're going to do is add our lanyard strap onto here. There should be a notch in your lining fabric around this location, but just use your judgment and place your lanyard strap down there with your swivel hook on it. I'm not making a lanyard strap, but I will do that for you, just a little aside now, but then we'll come back and we'll just add it on here. So what I'm going to do is go find my piece of twill tape and my swivel hook and twill tape. So I'm going to use those. I don't have very much of this fabric left, so I just want to keep it for, and I quite like the brown with the black with the bronze. So in this case, when I use this stuff, I just use a double length of it, and so I'll cut that. It's a little bit over long now. I'll trim it back. Okay, so get rid of that. Not much of that left. So I might actually, I know this doesn't fit it perfectly, but I kind of don't mind. I know I should, but I don't. I kind of like that little gather, and I'm going to just do a little line of stitches across there to hold it. And the black stitching should be fine on the dark brown. I tend to change my, I'm just going to leave it exposed. So it's at 3.5 my stitch length anyway, which is kind of a top stitching. So I'm just going to do that. So I've just done 3 stitches in the middle. Trim off the little edge end bits. Any little messy bits at the back. And I think that looks quite nice. And then I just want to make sure that it's as long as the base of the bag, or whatever length the pattern piece is. And then I'm going to place it there. And baste it in place there. So you can use the notch position or just use your own judgment. So again, it's about a ½ centimetre or 3/16 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to trim off the excess tape now. So there we are. So that's that bit done. I used a piece of cotton twill tape to make my lanyard strap, but of course you can use the pattern piece H, which is the lanyard pattern piece, and cut that out of either it's called up its lining, which I have here, or you could use the outer fabric alternative if you wanted a contrast. It's a little bit easier to do in the lining because obviously you've got 4 layers that you're sewing and it's thinner. So I have cut it out, and the first thing I did was fold it in half and press, and then I folded the sides in and press them, and then you fold it over and press. So I'm going to go over and give it another press again. I do also have my swivel hook here, which has fits pretty well to the size of the 12.5mm lanyard. It's like a 1/2 inch lanyard strap final width. So I'm just going to go over and give that a little press to flatten it out again. Okay, so that's a bit crisper. So the first thing I will do is to top stitch down one side. Again, as per with my hand straps, I quite like it when they're not perfectly symmetrical with stitching down both sides, but that's entirely your own preference. I know I'd say the vast majority of people will stitch down both sides. I'm making sure my stitch length is at about 3.5 for top stitching. And as always, I'm just using the little kind of shine on my presser foot as a guide, and I'm going to keep that in line with the edge of the fabric. Okay, so that's pretty good. I will trim off the threads at the end. So I have a pretty neat end there. I'm going to be threading it into the lanyard, and then I'm going to fold it over. And just as the way in which I made the strap, the webbing strap, I'm going to make sure the fold is down far enough that I can easily stitch across it and around and turn and get my presser foot past the bulk of the metal. So you might be able to do it neater than I can. That kind of, like that. I like that. I'm just going to take it easy, put no pressure on myself, and just pull it out a little bit. So I'm going to stitch a little square of stitching and a diagonal stitch across. I'm just holding it in place as I get the needle down. Oops. Okay. I'll lift the presser foot to turn. And as with the webbing strap, which you'll see, I have I'm going to go just past the edge of the fabric so that I'm encasing it to the edge, the frayed edge of the strap, so that you can kind of encase it in the stitching. Okay. Just going to trim that thread while it's there. You can see there the presser foot is going to be sitting on the webbing. That's not ideal, or on the presser foot's going to be sitting on the D-ring, but it should work out fine. And then I'll do a little diagonal across. Just trim off the little bits of excess thread. Because I back stitched at the start and the end, I'm not going to worry about the thread, tying the threads in, and I'm using a matching thread, so it's really quite neat looking. There we are. So that's that compared to just using a bit of webbing.